juncture, when someone needs to encounter joy, God always provides a messenger. And so I want you to carefully think about this. Maybe today the messenger is your pastor. Maybe today the messenger is saying to you, let joy be a part of your story. And so what does joy demand? Because if we're going to experience it, we have to understand what it demands. And the first thing it does, it demands we look for a messenger. The second thing that it demands for each one of us is that we learn how to anticipate life's challenges. Because oftentimes we have challenges come at us, and we have to be careful to anticipate those. Don't let them get the best of it, but realize they're coming at us to teach us something profound and something powerful. And as a result, we start anticipating. And guess what? Everything's not always going to be easy. Sometimes things are going to be challenging. What happens to you? You start going, you know what? I can have joy in the midst of all these circumstances because I'm anticipating that not everything's going to be great. Not every day is going to be wonderful. And I always tell people to keep this principle in mind. Not every day is easy, but every day is good when the joy of the Lord rests on your life. Not every day is easy, but every day is good. Imagine what would happen if you're here today and all of a sudden you let His joy rest on you. I mean, His joy just becomes a part of who you are. And you go, you know what? I don't have to be like, I can let Him lift the load off of me. He can lift this burden off my heart and life. And He become a part of who I am, and I can be guided by Him. It demands, though, that we look for the messenger God has for us. And I guarantee you that they come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. They come in all kinds of different backgrounds. They come always with the same message, and that is, there's a hope that rests in God that you can't take away no matter what. The third thing that joy demands is simply this. You have to realize He is always with you. He's never going to leave you. He's never going to forsake you. Let me tell you what happens. When you get in the middle of something really challenging, it doesn't get the best of you because you realize, guess what? He's with me. He's watching over me. He's guiding every step. And it's interesting because in any given week, I have the privilege of hearing lots of different challenging stories. In any given week. From here and all over the world. And it's interesting because many times the stories all come back to someone wondering if He's with them. And watch this carefully. He's not only with you, He's watching over you. And as He watches over you, He speaks to your heart, and He helps you become who He wants you to be. So in 1 Thessalonians chapter 3, here's where Paul is. Paul is probably overwhelmed with reality. He has the purpose he'd like to hear. And notice if you would in verse 1, because I want you to see today some things that will show you His way to discover how to have joy that God intended. All right? And I want to point out several verses to you in Scripture. And some of them we're going to read, some of them I'm going to identify, but I'm going to tell you you're going to discover. If you look at the Bible, interlaced throughout the Bible, is this awareness that if you get joy inside of you, you bless Him. Because what happens, it doesn't get the best of you. You bless Him and something begins to happen inside of your heart, your story, and your life. So, look if you would. Verse 1, 1 Thessalonians chapter 3. We're going to dig into the text. Hopefully it'll help you get a handle on what can happen inside of your story if you let Him be everything. And I want to give you this caveat of thought before we look at this verse. This week I read lots of things during the week, but I was reading an author's thought on something that really hit me. And the thought was this. It doesn't matter how many sermons you hear, how many verses you read, how many chapters you absorb, the only thing that will matter is the direct proportion of its relevance to who you are. And as I read that, I thought, you know what? You mean I could preach a sermon and if it's not relevant to somebody, they don't get anything? The answer is yes. So I want you to think about this. What if the most relevant thing that you can encounter today is the joy of the Lord? What if it's more relevant than what your job is, what your situation is, what your circumstances are? What if it's the most relevant thing? And it's a direct proportion of application to what it is you have in life, it becomes relevant to you, then you go, you know what, I can live this out. I can become a part of this. And just yesterday, I was communicating with a friend in Ukraine, and the pastor of the largest church that we work at within Ukraine found himself in an automobile driving home from Germany into Ukraine, was hit head on. And they began to share with me the story, and they sent the picture of the pastor sitting on the step of the ambulance, grieving for hours, 13 hours there in that situation, knowing that out of that same moment, his wife had entered into eternity, and his son had entered into a hospital. And as I looked at that picture, I thought to myself, could he find joy in the midst of the most anguishing and painful moment of his life? And as I prayed for him, I said, Lord, let your joy become even more real to him in the midst of this, because we can rejoice that even in the midst of great adversity, God is faithful. God watches over us. He speaks to our heart. He meets our need. And so today, I want you to imagine that you're Paul, and you have this great love for this church, the same kind of love I have for the One Heart Church. It's the greatest love I've ever had for a church. And he has this love, and it's inside of him, and all of a sudden he begins to write in chapter 3, verse 1. He starts with the word therefore, which tells you something. He's referring to what he just expressed in the very latter part of chapter 2. So look at, if you would, and for just a moment, at verse 19. Chapter 2. For who is our hope or joy, or crown of exaltation? Is it not even you in the presence of the Lord Jesus at his coming? For you are our glory and joy. Therefore, verse 1, chapter 3. Therefore, when we could endure it no longer, we thought it best to be left behind in Athens alone. And we sent Timothy, our brother, and God's fellow worker in the gospel of Christ, to strengthen and encourage you as to your faith. Now I want you to get this in mind for a moment. The words left behind have the idea of being abandoned. Okay? Which what he was saying was, it was okay for us to be abandoned if we find out you are living the way you're supposed to live, with the joy you're supposed to have. And what happens here is, all of a sudden, God sends a messenger to them in the name of Timothy. And isn't it interesting, by the way, that Paul sends the quiet, shy, timid one to bless those who are looking for encouragement in their faith and encouragement in their joy? And what happens is, Timothy shows up, and he goes because he's given an assignment. And listen carefully. If God gives you an assignment, be sure to take that responsibility very seriously, because you never know who you're going to bring joy to. You never know who you're going to speak into their heart in a significant way. And so as a result, God sends, and I want you to see, there's 2 or 3 things I want you to see today that will be helpful to you in your journey of faith as you try to discover what joy can do. The first one is clearly this. God always sends messengers for our heart. He always sends somebody that will speak into our heart in a way that we need them most. And it's interesting to me because it may not be who you expected. For example, if you were to ask me, would Timothy be the one I would pick first to go and boldly declare what's going on with your faith, what's going on with your love, what's going on with joy? Probably not. But it shows you something. Sometimes God knows exactly who he's supposed to send your way in order to guide you right where you're supposed to go. Listen to the messenger. Grab hold of what it is he's saying. And by the way, they come to you in different times, different moments. Grab hold of that and be blessed by it. Because here it says very clearly that he sent Timothy to strengthen, look at it, strengthen and encourage you as to your faith. And you know what you discover? His intent was very, very clear. To strengthen and encourage. To strengthen and encourage. And what happens is, when you learn how to be blessed by someone else and they bring strength to you, they speak into your heart, they speak into your life, they encourage you in your journey, what happens to you? You get so inspired because they do something for you. It happened to me this week. I was interacting with somebody, I met somebody, and they were asking what my bracelet was about. And I began to explain to them why wait, act now, what it really means. And some of you may be wondering that. It's really the story of what motivates us to live a life of joy. Anyway, when I got done, the lady looked at me and she said, I love this story. It speaks to me. It speaks to who I want to be. And I took my bracelet off, and I put it on her arm and said, wear it. Be reminded, don't put off to tomorrow what God intends you to do today. So I want to challenge you today. If you need to be strengthened and encouraged, stay in his house, stay in his word, stay walking in his spirit, and watch what happens when he does that. Because it's interesting to me, I'm telling you about my 2 friends that are examples of joy. They go back 20 and 30 years. They when I think about their life, they basically exemplify this idea of being an encouragement to people. Because what happened, in fact, I made notes about their life because they served faithfully. They served faithfully. And I want to tell you what you discover. When we are faithful, something begins to happen inside of us. When we're faithful, God begins to use it in a unique way. And I'm going to tell you, when you're faithful, He honors your faithfulness. He blesses you in powerful and amazing ways. What would happen if all of us let the joy of God rest on our lives? But you know what? I am done with all the circumstances that get in my way. And I'm going to let His joy be a part of my story. I'm just going to let His joy rest on me. And when it rests on me, I'm going to be better than I've ever been before. Imagine what would happen to you and me if our intent was just to strengthen and encourage others we met. No matter where we meet them at, our lives would change forever. But for my friends, they weren't just those who served faithfully. They also ministered graciously. I can remember how they ministered to our children when our children lost their grandmother. I can remember how they were the ones who always wrote the note. They were the ones who always opened the eyes of the kid. They were the ones who said, you know what? God's going to be with you. And I want you to think about this for a moment. What would happen if you and I became ministers of joy to people we know at work, in life, at the restaurant, at the gas station, that something began to happen inside of our story? This happened to me this week. I was at a restaurant, and there were 4 ladies coming staggered behind me to come in the restaurant, and I knew if I let them go in first that I'd be waiting longer. But I thought the right thing to do is just to hold this door open. So I held the first door, and the lady walked in, didn't say thank you. No, I'm going to slam it on the next one. And, but I held it for the next lady. Then I held it for the next lady. 4 different ones. The 4th person coming through was startled, I think, that I was still holding the door, because she saw her friends weren't saying thank you. But she came in and she said, thank you very much. Well, you know what? Man, I had so much joy. I thought the first 3 tried to steal my joy. The 4th one brought me joy. And here's what I want you to see. You may hold the door for somebody. You may even let them cut in traffic when they don't deserve it. I mean, how many of you get on Peachtree Industrial or somewhere else, and you're going down there, you're headed toward 285, and you get in that long line being the gracious person you are. And then all of a sudden, at the last minute, somebody cuts right in front of you. And what happens to your spirit? Is it a spirit of joy? Or is it a spirit of anger? Would you like to tear their car completely apart? I've always prayed the Lord to give me a mechanism to go on the side of my car that shreds a tire. So when they would come and they would try to cut in on me, I would look at them in joy and shred their tire and wave at them as I went on down the road, pulling my contraption back in. The truth is, I can't get away with that. But I'd like to have one. Because it happens in many places. And then you get on these roads like Ashford done with Jimmy Carter, where they have the weird roads. All right? Where you now have to go this way to go that way. And that'll never make sense to me, but what happens? Everybody gets in the right lane, and it's interesting. They put those little plastic poles up to stop everything. What does that do? That just helps them knock it down quicker to get where they need to be. They're not worried about those plastic pipes, but they know they're not going to destroy their car. And here's what I want you to think about in your own life. What if every lane you hit in life, instead of getting overwhelmed by someone else's behavior, you just said, Lord, I may be a minute later to get where I'm supposed to be, but I'm going to rejoice. I'll tell you what happened. You'd find God has sent a messenger to you to bring joy to your heart and life. Today, think about what would happen if you did that. But it doesn't stop there. Look at verse 3. Second thing I want you to see. First of all, look for messengers to come your way. They're going to bring you joy. Second thing I want you to see. Look at it. So that no one would be disturbed by these afflictions, for you yourselves know that we have been destined for this. For indeed, when we were with you, we kept telling you in advance we were going to suffer affliction. And so it came to pass, as you know. For this reason, when I could endure it no longer, I also sent to find out about your faith, for fear that the tempter might have tempted you, and our labor would have been in vain. Watch this carefully, because he uses the word tempter. And what he says here is this. These adversities were coming our way. We told you they were going to come our way. So listen carefully. You are going to face things you don't choose to face. You're going to face issues that get the best of you at times. But be careful, because here's what you discover. Difficulty should direct us to the overcomer, not to the tempter. Difficulty should not cause us to lose our joy in the midst of that circumstance. We ought to be able to, you know what? You can't get the best of me. Because what Paul says in Thessalonians is, guess what? Everything we told you we were going to face, we are facing. We have a nephew that's on mission to Uganda. And they have been traveling. They have already been traveling. They're in their third day. And they still haven't got out of New York City. They're supposed to be at Entebbe several days ago. Which, by the way, if they'd have flown Delta, they'd already been there. No, sorry about that. But they flew somebody else. They couldn't get there. I said that just for feel good. But the reality is they're stuck in New York. But interesting what they did. They could have taken that and been completely frustrated because they keep trying to get across what I can't get there. But instead, they went and did mission work on Staten Island with a young pastor who's launching a church there. You see what happens? Sometimes you get some circumstance coming at you, some adversity. Don't let it get back to you. Surrender yourself to him. Watch what he does in the midst of that. What is he doing? He's allowing the challenges that come at us are always in proportion to those who love him the most. I mean, when we come at them, things that come at us that are very, very challenging, just remember this. It is all to affirm that he loves you. Because he allows some things that we would never wish in order for us to center our joy on who he is and what he can do. You just have to be willing to believe him and trust him. And so, the first thing you do is look for a messenger. Secondly, just remember, difficulty coming at you can't get the best of you because God's going to direct you. Verse 6. Look at it with me if you would. We're wrapping this all together. I'm just about finished. Verse 6. But now that Timothy has come to us from you, and has brought us good news of your faith and love, and that you always think kindly of us, longing to see us just as we also long to see you. For this reason, brethren, in all our distress and affliction, we were comforted about you through your faith. For now we really live if you stand firm in your faith. What does he say here? He says that you are going to have joy, you're going to have people, and you're going to have a God who inspires your faith and love. Don't you love inspirational people? I read the story last night as I was going to sleep of a girl in Lebanon. And it was the most tragic story of anguish and heartache and difficulty. Forced into marriage without a choice. And ended up being in a horrible relationship. Where when she miscarried, her husband divorced her instead of blessing her. And so she told her mother and father, mother and father said, no, we're going to find you a second husband. The second husband beat her. Beat her. And I read this story, and I'm going, wow, how could she ever find joy? The third. So she ended up divorced from this husband. The third husband became part of her story, and she was so mesmerized by him because she was employed at the Four Seasons Hotel in Tripoli. Had a great job, had a great life, met an amazing man. Didn't realize that he was in sex trafficking. He married her to use her to sell her. So she divorced him. And then she found herself broken, overwhelmed, and talking to a friend, and her question was, is there any chance I can find peace? Is there any chance that I can find Jesus? Is there something different than what we live in? The faith that we have. And as a result of that, she gave her heart to Christ. And very interesting because her mother had named her Sunni to attach her to the Muslim faith. But when she found Jesus, she changed her name to Shalom, peace. And it's interesting what happens sometimes. We just have to stop there. Who inspires our faith? Who inspires our love? And what happened here is Paul said, man, I keep thinking about you. And you're standing firm, and it makes the biggest difference. And here's what I want you to say. When you think about your own life, our perspective of our future and relationships that we have, they should guide us to joy. We've got to thank God for the different people that come our way that connect us into such a great joy in our lives, that it does something inside of us. It changes who we are, and it speaks to our lives in an amazing way. What happens if all of a sudden we see everybody coming our way as a point of joy? As a point of joy and a blessing. I'll tell you what happened. You don't get caught up with things that don't matter. You find yourself zeroing in on something that doesn't matter. Finally, and we're done. I want you to see one more thing. Because he makes this statement in verse 9, for what thanks can we render to God? For what thanks? And here's what he's saying. You want to have joy? You learn how to be grateful to God for all those who cross your path. That open our hearts up to life the way God intended. And I'm going to tell you, discover, you can look back across across your life and you find different people. Grateful to God that they came into your story. Grateful to God that they became a part of your life. And as a result, you go, Lord, thank you for so-and-so. Thank you for so-and-so. Thank you for this person who blessed me. Thank you for this person who spoke to my life. And what happens is all of a sudden you get grateful. And I'll tell you what you discover. Because what happens is, as you read this text, he makes it clear in verse 10, for we night and day keep praying for you earnestly, that we may see your face and he may complete what is lacking in your faith. And what's he saying here? He's saying, in the midst of your adversity, God can help you. He can bless you. And today, as you think about that, think about this principle. He can establish a heart of joy in the midst of adversity. He can establish a heart of joy and direct you forever. And this week, I'm going to send you all the verses that God used to speak to my heart on joy in our weekly email. I want you to read them. Think about them. If you're not on an email list, take one of the cards and you fill out and say, put me on the email list. I want to start hearing what spiritual principles can help me during the week. Because I'm going to tell you what you discover. When you read this text, you discover something. He wants us to experience his joy. We just have to be ready. And if you're here today, I ask you a simple question. Are you ready to experience his joy? And if you are, watch what he does. Let's pray together. Father, thank you. Thank you for your amazing joy. When I think about someone not speaking for 17 years, it astonishes me. But when I hear his testimony, I realize that out of all that silence, he found solitude and wisdom to live more effectively. Lord, what would happen in our hearts and lives if we took the next 17 years of our lives and we want the joy of the Lord to rest on our hearts? We want the joy of the Lord to speak to us. Lord, I know for a fact that we would have a different life. So, Lord, as we gathered here, we began our service talking about what faith does, what real faith does. And maybe there's someone here who just needs to surrender their heart to you and experience real faith. Maybe there's someone here who needs to join our fellowship, become a part of who we are. Lord, whatever it is you want to do it in people's lives today. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen. If you're here today and the Lord is speaking to your heart, you'd like to respond, like to become a part of our family, like to give your heart to him, I invite you. Now, I'll be down here waiting on you. I welcome you. Ron's over here, Pastor Ron. We'd love to help you in any way in your journey. We stand together and say, you come as God speaks to your heart.